Welcome to the Teamwork Advantage podcast with Greg Gregory. Join us as Greg interviews powerful thought leaders and successful team and leadership experts from across the country on teamwork, leadership, and organizational culture. Now let's check in for this week's episode.
Welcome to the Teamwork Advantage, a podcast dedicated to the growth, development, and advancement of three key areas in every aspect of our lives: teamwork, leadership, and culture. Hi, I am Greg Gregory, the founder and host of the Teamwork Advantage podcast. We're now into our fifth season and growing exponentially at this point. We've gotten downloads recently, as many as 53 countries. We're excited to focus in and help people all around the world on how they can get better at teamwork, leadership, and culture, which, by the way, stems off in other areas such as how to have better families, how to have better communication with people on your teams. It also goes into how to provide better levels of customer service, and that's so important in so many businesses. Today, we're brought to you with a lot of spirit and enthusiasm, and we're bringing you a guest this year from Long Island, New York. Doug Roberts is joining us, and he's worked with leading ed tech entrepreneurs and district administrators for almost 20 years. He's developed partnerships that improve outcomes for students and help nascent organizations get their, and I love this term, sea legs. As the founder and president of Education Solutions Consulting, Doug found that there was a piece of the puzzle that was missing, and that's so important. A lot of times we know something's missing, but we don't know what it is. In this case, he knew and found what was missing, and that was a barrier between those who actually run the school districts and those who start companies to help school districts. So he partnered with some of the nation's most innovative educational leaders to form IEI, the Institute for Education Innovation, to help bridge that gap. As a Princeton graduate, Doug is a former public high school social studies teacher, and I've got stories about my high school social studies teachers we'll have to talk about later. He's also an ed tech business development executive and earned his master's in education in teaching and curriculum from the Harvard University Graduate School of Education. So, first off, Doug, welcome to the Teamwork Advantage.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, Greg.
Great to have you on board here. And it's interesting because I haven't had very many, and I have had a few folks from the education background, but you come to us with a little bit of a different twist on it. You've got the business and the education side of it, which I think is absolutely fascinating. But let's face it, you didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to start IEI. So take us a little bit, what got you to where you are a little bit? You grew up in Long Island. You said you left for a little while and you came back. What got you to where you are today?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for having me and for your interest in what we do. I guess I've always been one of those people who, if there wasn't the thing that I felt needed to be there, then I would try to build it. And that has been at times quite successful and other times not, which is the entrepreneurs. No one ever people don't talk enough about the things they do that don't work out. And I think they're just as much a part of the success story as the things that do.
Absolutely.
So I think that's been what I've been up to for most of my adult life and my high school life. Like as a high school kid, I was a singer and a musician. And we didn't have a student run singing performing group. So I started one in high school that still actually exists today, all these 30 whatever years later. So that was just the first time that I did that. IEI came about because I was heavily involved in the consulting work, running this consulting business that helped companies figure out how to navigate the phalanx of school districts, not just, how to sell to them, which is hard, but how to put the right expectations into their business plans so that they could effectively work with school districts and not expect them to operate like the consumer world does, which was a big part of our work, was just sort of teaching these often well-meaning, often really pretty, the people who tend to start ed tech companies tend to be very high functioning, intelligent folks. And so it's hard for some people to understand why they can meet with other high functioning, intelligent people who run school districts, yet they have to move at a much slower pace than we do here in the private sector. And it comes down to where the money comes from. When it's public money, there has to be a public process. And a lot of our strategy work was helping those founders and entrepreneurs understand how school districts work. So specifically, I figured, why don't I create the opportunity for these conversations to happen directly? Because I know so many superintendents, as I've gotten to know them over the years, who would share various feedback and complaints about the industry. Why does the industry build this when what we need is that? Why do they send me 4 million emails that I'm never going to read? Why is it so hard for me to find the thing that we actually need when there are so many people providing these solutions that we don't need? And the answer is that there's no Sears Roebuck catalog for everything that a school district needs, right? There's no car and driver magazine. Like, if you want to go buy a car, there are a few places you can go and figure out which is going to be the right car for you and your family. We don't have that. We have had places that try to sort of, review the companies from a kind of private sector standpoint. They've been either connected to or funded by private equity or venture capital investors in ed tech. So there's sort of an agenda there to kind of drive flow for the companies that they're investing in, but never a sort of clearinghouse where the people who lead the school districts are driving the discussion. And that's what IEI was intended to be. And, part of why what we do looks like your kind of traditional professional organization gathering. That's just because the way superintendents work, the job is so all encompassing and so intense and so heavily emotional. I mean, you have to do a ton of work with people in really tough situations, whether you're dealing with political stuff. This past couple of years, strife over masks, and now strife over whether there should be armed guards on campus, right? You're always dealing with people in these tough moments, or you're dealing with, the toughest cases of issues around, like, is a kid getting the right services in special education, or, controversial issues regarding student athletics or a student protest. I mean, it's such an intense job and you've got all these people reporting to you who have many people reporting to them. We don't get their attention on this stuff in the way that we need unless we take them out of that environment and give them a couple of days just to play around and think like innovators. Mm-hmm. We help the soups sit and do kind of entrepreneurial-ish work for a couple of days so they can understand how that side of the equation works, and that understanding that gets generated, plus our analytics-driven matching process, help these two groups of people, district leaders and founders, entrepreneurs, connect and have ways to use time that help them both get better at their jobs. That's more or less what we built, and we got there because every other way I was trying to do it was not quite as efficient. And you can only charge clients so much on a retainer, and you can only get superintendents who trust you to take so many meetings with you until it's like, okay, Doug, I can't just meet with all of your clients. So we built IEI. And your original question was about like my background. So I worked for many years at a place called Amplify, which was then called Wireless Generation. I was a sales leader there. And before that, coming out of teaching, I did a lot of like curriculum development stuff. So I tried a bunch of different jobs after leaving teaching, and here we are.
And that's fascinating how you got there. And your example, I thought, of taking the administrators out of their everyday life for a couple of days was powerful. So that goes back, and I'm sure you've read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, by Dr. Stephen Covey. Wow, when did it come out? 1983. And habit 7 is called Sharpen the Saw. And it's one of those things that when you try to sharpen your saw, if you're trying to do it while you're working, it's not going to get sharp.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is taking them out to allow them to sharpen that saw, that entrepreneurial saw, to be able to work with the administrators and the administrators to be able to work with them. Am I about right on that?
Yes, except I have to admit I have not read Covey's book, with all respect to Dr. Covey. I haven't, but I've read like excerpts, and you see outlines, and yes, I totally agree with that point. And I want to make sure the people listening to this understand, school superintendents, when we talk about them kind of sharpening their entrepreneurial skills, this is not because they are going to go make money off of these skills. It's that I think we've started to realize, and we saw during this pandemic, when you had these people playing the most serious game of whack-a-mole you're ever going to see. What? I have to get food delivered to thousands of students in their neighborhoods with closed school buildings and kitchens I can't occupy. I have to make sure all the kids have access to internet because we're going to, right? Like on and on and on as this thing unfolded. I have to shut the school in 3 days and try to get people educated. Like that was entrepreneurial thinking. In the moment, you have to pivot quickly. You have to respond to the stimulus and make a decision that has great impact, and hope you make the right decision. Talk to your colleagues, try to make sure you get it right, talk to your board. So I think that kind of, it can be very easy in public education to say, well, on this date, we do this. And, then on Wednesday night, I go to the middle school concert, and like, it can become very formulaic. And this group that's with us is anything but. And now they're doing things like, well, what did we come out of this pandemic doing better than what we did before? Maybe our schedule should be changed. Maybe we should think about changing the calendar from the old agrarian calendar. And I think the ability to kind of think through those big ideas with your colleagues in our community, go back to your board and your colleagues and say, hey, everybody, I've got this idea, and then try to sell that, workshop that idea and sell it if you must. That's an entrepreneurial skill that in this case is being used to try to improve the lives of kids by the district getting better at what they do. And it requires a leader with vision to make that happen. And entrepreneurial thinking is always part of that.
Yeah. And what happens is you get into it. I'm going to use a term here called DevOps, which is development and operations. And in the computer world, there are people who are developing something. There are people who are operating, and those two aren't talking. So in your situation, you're talking about people who have got ideas to try and help the school districts, but the school districts are getting the wrong things. And so they're not communicating back and forth. So that's part of the challenge. Am I on the right page there?
Yeah. There has been traditionally the old school public education, I think, regarded entrepreneurs as being kind of bad because they're trying to make a buck, but they never consider the people who provide the school bus or the heating oil, right? The stuff that they're used to having in schools as being entrepreneur. Like those businesses are okay. And so I think we've been working to really break that down and help, especially as more and more, we're in a world now where if you've got an idea and, an uncle with a couple of bucks who can get you started, or you got a couple of bucks in your savings, you can build a viable ed tech business after teaching for 7 years. And, we're losing some leadership talent, our talent of our pipeline of educational leadership talent is leaving us for the private sector because I don't want to wait and I'm frankly one of them. I was like, well, I could wait this out and I could be a principal in 10 years and then maybe a superintendent in 15 years, or I can go have a leadership role in 6 months by performing well. And that's something that public education kind of has to reckon with, because the people who stay do so out of a great sense of commitment and duty and service. And some people have that. Like, I'd like to think I have that. I was just in the wrong place, wrong district for me to stay forever. So you have to commit to an agency, an organization for like 10, 20 years to become a leader. And I think that's something that I think we're seeing change. And I think you're seeing more boards of education say to their superintendent, you know what, we can't pay you more than this, but we're okay with you doing consulting work on the side up to here, as long as it doesn't impact your day, 8 to 5, we need you kind of on, but if you want to, on the weekend, you want to give a talk or write a book, go knock yourself out. You're seeing more districts understand that this entrepreneurial piece has to become more a part of how we lead in our schools, because it's what our kids need. That's the world they're going to step into.
Yeah. And that applies in so many different aspects of business. I mean, when we stop to think about it, getting the entrepreneurial spirit. Now, I used to use a term that we have entrepreneurial mindset and a bureaucratic mindset. And so there are entrepreneurs with a bureaucratic mindset and their business fails miserably. There are also those who have an entrepreneurial mindset in a bureaucratic environment and they thrive.
If they don't get frustrated.
If they don't get frustrated.
Right.
But if they still got the entrepreneurial spirit, they're kind of reinventing it all the time. And that's what happens with the pandemic. They understood what they had to change. They realized what they needed to do to make that change. And then if that change wasn't right, they were okay with it by making a correction. And that, I think, that's what entrepreneurs are really, really good at. Whereas the bureaucrats, okay, this is what we need to do. They go all in with that and they don't know what to do if it doesn't work.
Right. And so I think you're seeing a kind of a course correct. Mm-hmm. And I think you're seeing districts start to realize that we can have two different kinds of leaders. If we have a kind of more bureaucrat superintendent, then we should have a chief academic who is pretty kind of, innovative and trying new things. We see that with our districts too. We have some of our member districts, the superintendent says, you know what, you go, like to a deputy, like you go represent us there because this is more your thing. And I think that there's some who wouldn't want to show a deputy the keys to the kingdom, that you get to go to these cool events and sit around and play with, like this one we're doing in a few weeks in Newport, Rhode Island. We're literally, I'm having them sit in software design workshops. I'm asking them, we've got 4 problem statements we're going to work on. And at the end of the 2.5 days, they're going to present their ideas with some wireframe drawings. I've got our partners drawing of tools they want the industry to build for them so they can be better at their jobs. So it's really fun. It's very academic. It's abstract a little bit, but it's work they never get to do because they can never spend 2 days doing that stuff. But it's work that's going to make them better at their jobs. Next time they got to go to a whiteboard and problem solve something with their team, they're going to have learned some new strategies for doing that from this exercise.
And what happens is when they do give, using your words here, the keys to the kingdom to someone else, what they're doing is showing they're okay by being vulnerable. Right. And allowing somebody else in there because they don't necessarily know everything. And there is nobody today who knows everything that they need to do. They need to allow those other people in. So that brings me to my question. You bring multiple industries together with IEI. Am I right?
So multiple segments of,
segments, yes, multiple segments coming in. So you're bringing in technology, you're bringing in education and educators, but you're also bringing in the investors trying to do all of this and make this all work. How is that? What have been some of the challenges you've had trying to make that work?
Well, I think, as we grow, I think you'll see more of the private equity venture capital types, really leaning in to what we do and showing up. Right now, I think for a lot of them, they kind of follow us and, we create a lot of the thought leadership content we create is really for industry leaders. We want the industry, including those who fund it through philanthropy or venture capital, we want them to pay attention to what we're doing. We want, if we're successful, 8 or 10 years from now, if the next Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates wants to put $200 million into public schools, we want them to call us. Our superintendents will be able to tell them, because you can ask any one of them, whenever they see one of these big philanthropy initiatives, they're like, man, I wish they would have called me. I could have told them how to spend money that would be effective, that would create effective outcomes for kids. A lot of times the ideas get workshopped in boardrooms and not in district offices, right? Yeah. And district offices are where the rubber meets the road for what has to get executed, because they know what the board is going to want, the community is going to want. They understand what the teachers and they are going to want, and what the kids need. So that's where I hope we get. So I think right now the challenge is, frankly, for everyone, just making time for this kind of work, convincing district leaders and board members that this is going to make your superintendent a better superintendent. It on paper, it can look like just a big party. It's not. We work pretty hard. We do some kind of wellness activities. Like we had a basketball tournament at the last one. Like we do spend time doing things that are fun, but that's, I think in general, we're reckoning with the fact that we've made this job of district leadership, superintendent, so hard and so emotionally taxing, particularly in places with high poverty, that we have to let these people take a break and let off some steam. And we might as well do so in a way that they can also gain ideas and insights that'll help them be better at their jobs.
And see, that goes back to part of sharpening the saw. You got to let the saw cool down in between you sharpens.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to do it. You got to make sure we're treating it. And it goes also to the Eleanor Roosevelt quote from years ago. You can't brighten the path of another without brightening your own. So you got to brighten your own path to be able to figure out what's going on. And so that brings me to a question. When we're looking at different levels, whether it's at the superintendent level, the principal level, to the teacher, the team leads, or wherever we are within that structure, there are some people who are still, and I'm going to use the term here, old school. Okay, now we've got that same challenge in many aspects of business too. Like, nope, I'm the boss. They want to do it that way. They don't quite get the change. And so sometimes when we're in a bureaucratic environment, that tends to be a little bit more prevalent. How do you position yourselves to try and help bring it into the newer realm of things? You were talking about maybe changing the calendar a little bit, talking about changing the timelines for schools. I mean, the timelines and the school calendars were set 100 years ago for other reasons that made sense at that time.
Sure.
So how do you get people to get on board with that?
Well, now everyone's used to it, though. I mean, what family doesn't plan for summer break?
Oh,
right?
exactly.
Everyone, this is the one. These 3 weeks between the 4th and the end of July are the 3 weeks when every kid in America pretty much is on summer break, and everyone kind of plans for it. That's a hard habit to break. So, you got to do political work there. You got to go sell that concept to your community. And here's why a shorter summer break and more frequent breaks throughout the year are better for you, which is the model they use in places like Finland. More frequent breaks, but longer days overall. There are always going to be people who, I always tell people, 75, if I had to guess, 75% of superintendents are not likely to travel out of state for anything, right? That's your kind of, in some ways it's either old school mentality or it's, I'm good. I read on my own. I don't, I'm not a big extrovert. I don't like to go, be in communities of people. I'm good. I've got my county superintendent meetings that keep me plugged in, and that's great. And that will always be the way it's going to be. But the other 25% are, trying to kind of grab every learning opportunity they can. And I think that it ends up becoming sort of a viral effect. Their kind of voracious curiosity about new stuff and going on the road and meeting new people filters out at the next county superintendent luncheon, where, well, you're in Maryland, you guys only have counties. So I guess it'd be like regions or states for you, but in a lot of states, they could be like 30 districts in a county and they all have lunch together once a month and, share out the work they're doing. And it kind of, trends that you see in consumer life tend to hit K-12 5 to 10 years later. And I think we're seeing that play out right now. And I think you've seen tech become, in the consumer side, be more in tune with people and their bodies and their mental health. And now schools are starting to implement those kinds of solutions. Mm-hmm. And so we trail, I think, in part because the old school, if you're using that kind of framework, the old school versus new school takes a while to virally kind of get out there. But almost everybody in these jobs cares deeply about doing the right thing for kids. So if they hear about something through an old school channel and they know it's going to work for kids, they'll implement it. Right. Will they also then implement something from a new school channel? If you can get them, that's the problem with the job, is it's not a place where, unlike consumer world, consumers, they can see a Facebook ad. I'm a big baseball fan. Like, I know every commercial during Yankees radio broadcasts. Like, I can probably sing some of the theme songs to you, right? So that's how consumers find out about stuff. Through these channels, the typical kind of email and social doesn't reach a lot of people. So it just takes longer. And these are people who superintendents work almost exclusively on referrals from friends. They dial a friend. Hey, what are you doing because everyone's worried about security right now. Do we have all the security protocols in place for next fall? based on what we all just saw with the tragedy in Uvalde. And so they call each other. What are you doing? What are you doing? They trust each other almost more than anyone else, which is a very old school way to do business, but it's
an effective way.
It's worked for many years. So that's why it just takes us a little longer, because they're not going to read the emails that people send them. They're not going to look at social media posts. Most of them have someone who reads social media for them and tells them about any major issues.
Yeah. So while it may be effective, it may not necessarily be efficient.
Yep, it takes longer, which is why, as we grow, then we'll be able to become more of this kind of clearinghouse for these ideas. That's why we're, but we don't want to grow too big, because part of what our members like is that it's a small community, and that's important to us.
So how do you bring these people together? How do you bring tech, education, and investment? How do you bring them together? Talk to us about your summits and how that works.
Sure. Yeah. So the partners, the industry people, they basically pay a sponsorship fee to come, and the superintendents are largely members of our group. Some of them are guests who are coming as through referral. It's all referral based on the same thing I was just saying about word of mouth. And so we have a process that we use for getting the districts to communicate what they're working on and what their big goals are. And they communicate that through our process. Our partners look at the districts who are coming, look at their stated goals, and then we have a map. They sort of prioritize who they want to try to spend time with. Then the partners all present to the entire room when we first get on site. And then our superintendent members go onto our app and they put in their preferences based on, they just hear, it's not a long presentation. It's a 2-minute intro talk. Hi, I'm Doug. I'm from the Institute for Education, and we help blah, blah, blah. We train them, we train our partners how to do this little 2-minute talk so that it becomes a sorting exercise.
Yep, because we refer to in a lot of places as your elevator speech.
Yep, exactly. But it's not a pitch per se. It's more like, I want to tell you exactly what we do, because this is about finding, if you need to talk to us, then put us on your list. And then our matching algorithm sets up short 25-minute one-to-one meetings the following day. And those one-to-one meetings they work because the soups, for the most part, chose to meet with the vendor. There's nothing, this is when I started this, all the soups I was working with, they're like, just let us choose who we meet with, and we're going to really dive into it. They hate being put into a room with a vendor that's not a good fit for what they're looking to do at that moment.
Absolutely.
And so they're like, I'll talk to those people outside of the meetings, but in the formal meeting time, help make the list as close as possible to what I'm trying to accomplish, and I'll be able to, learn as much as possible from this. So it becomes the best learning experience they have with us, is what they tell us. So that's the bread and butter of it. There's some relationship building activities. There are sessions where we kind of help each other work on various things we're working on, or help each other negotiate contracts, or talk through, we have a session called 5 Minutes of Fame, where soups get up and I just give them the floor. You got something you want to tell us about for 5 minutes that you've been working on, something you're proud of, something that's been a struggle. And you'll get first-year superintendents going after 30-year veteran superintendents, and they just give a reflection, and we record it and we publish it on our podcast, because we want the world to know what these people are working on and thinking about. And we really want to elevate the status of superintendents kind of in the landscape of our industry.
What challenges are you still facing at IEI trying to bring these people together now?
You mean internally here?
Well, both internally, and let's look at both internally and then externally, trying to bring the people together.
Yeah. All right. So there's just the pandemic stuff. There are people who feel guilty leaving their district leaders. They feel, they want to make sure everything is going to be, heading into a new year. So it's all starting over again. Is there going to be another wave of COVID that gets through the vaccines? There's all kinds of worries about that and coming off of that. And I think there's some very real PTSD out there, just generally. People like organizational fatigue, and some politics. So, as these, and it comes down to these board meetings. If these board meetings have people all upset and heated about this issue or that issue, the gun thing is going to be probably the big one this fall. And you've got a midterm election. So you're going to have, in some places, you're going to have people come out and talk about critical race theory and all of that kind of stuff. And it's really hard to not be there when that's happening. Even if the board meetings on a Thursday and IEI ends on a Wednesday, you show up flat-footed and your board could be like, hey, we needed you here to help us these last few days as we got these 4,000 emails. So that's always a challenge. And I think the pandemic has made those moments even more challenging. I think
definitely exacerbated it.
Yeah. The second thing is just like, we can't be everything to everyone. And for us, it's just figuring out exactly what our niche is and making sure we're really good at it, making sure we can scale it. Always a challenge with an in-person event, right? We're trying to find ways to reach more superintendents without them having to travel to our event. And that's something we're working on in the future.
You're going to be doing them virtually.
No.
Sorry.
Definitely
I
not.
have a little tongue in cheek on that one.
Yeah. No, just different ways to engage that are much lighter. Right. So we're looking into that. We're also facing a time when this is the highest turnover we've ever had of superintendents. It's like double what it normally is because a lot of people are leaving the profession. And so what are the impacts on educational leadership, generally speaking, as you have a ton of rookies trying to figure out the new jobs, and a lot of them are going to feel like they want to stay close to home those first few months, which makes sense. And then you just have there's always this, there are some companies that want to work with school districts, but just they don't get it. They don't necessarily want to do the work to kind of really craft the solution around the problems instead of saying, education's the one thing where everybody has 18 years or whatever, 13 years of experience. Most people have gone to a public school for 13 years, right? Or if they went to a private school, it's not terribly dissimilar when you think of the big picture, right? Everybody went to school for 13 years. So a lot of people have developed opinions about what they think is good and is not good in schools. And you get a couple of bucks behind you when you go build your solution. Your idea might be genius. It also might not, but we're always trying to get people to come to the table and talk with us and let us help and let us coach, because these superintendents are really, in our crew, they're very good at seeing the big picture and taking a real interest in a founder at any stage of his or her development of the company and helping them be better at what they do. Because if the companies are better, then we're going to be better at our jobs.
Right. Because again, I go back and I've used this quote several times in our podcast. John Kennedy said, a rising tide raises all ships. And when you get both sides working together, we're going to raise the education level and the education quality of our students from K to 12. And I think that's the ultimate goal that we're looking for.
Yeah. I would say too, because I know you focus a lot on helping teams and helping teams grow. There's been a real sense in the last couple of years, empathy has become a big part of what we do in public education, more of a kind of value and as an activity versus just, I care about you. It's, well, I'm now, our district leadership team is going to go give the principal and her school administrator team a 4-day weekend, and we're going to run your school for 2 days so you can get a break from all this tough stuff you've been doing, right? We're now putting teacher wellness rooms in every school so teachers can do yoga, meditate, whatever, exercise, like taking real action to go beyond just, I care about you, but let me show you structurally within our school system how we care about our staff.
Get away from just lip service of saying we care about you.
Right. And not just teachers, school bus drivers, janitors, right. Like make sure the staff knows that we're really glad you're here and we know that you have a choice of place to work. And, because we're competing with everybody in town for a dwindling workforce of bus drivers and teachers' aides. And, and we want to make sure we provide a really good environment for people who work here.
Now, Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines, used to always say, our number one customer is not our customer. Our number one customer is our employee. When we take care of our employee will take care of our customer.
Right.
So if we can get superintendents, principals, administrators through the teachers and the teachers' aides to realize they take care of each other, in turn, they will take care of the student, which is the ultimate customer there.
Yep, student and the family, and that's
Yeah.
something we've been real. We had a whole session talking about this. Our winter retreat was talking about strategies we're using to make sure that our staff feels valued and feels that we're looking after their wellness. And you've seen, I mean, you don't see school districts make decisions quickly. Districts and I know because a bunch of them are in our group, and they were all texting each other, and they heard about it through the grapevine, that they all just decided, I'm going to go ask my board at my meeting before Thanksgiving if we can just close school that entire week, because everyone is stressed out, and especially if we're wearing masks all the time, like everyone's just done. And so you had all these districts vote, 3 days before Thanksgiving break to extend Thanksgiving break by 2 days, just to give everyone a week off. Like that's the kind of innovation that, you have to be in a certain position in your district and your tenure to suggest, because if it comes from you and not the board, it could seem like, you're trying to avoid work. But when everyone saw how hard all these people worked throughout this pandemic, contact tracing is a time intensive operation. And it's not like, in some districts, they hired some people to help with it, but a lot of times it was like all hands on deck, we got to do contact tracing. And that adds to the burnout factor.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I think we're getting to the point of more frequent breaks and going to a longer school year is going to work. Europe has been dealing with this on the education side, but they've also been dealing with it in the business side for years, in the fact that I met a family years ago. That year that I met them, they were coming over for their 1 month holiday, and they were touring Texas. The year before, they took their 1 month holiday and toured California. 1 month holiday before that, they toured New England. They take it and they enjoy, and they take a whole month to do that.
Yeah, it's a different approach. Yeah, you're seeing a push for a more balanced calendar in a lot of these districts. But it's not going to work for every community, and you have to kind of wade through those discussions. So that's the kind of stuff we talk about. Like, I'm thinking about changing the calendar in my district. Anybody got any ideas? And again,
it's changing the calendar in the district, because each district, and you're right, here in Maryland where I live, we've got 24 jurisdictions, 23 counties in the city of Baltimore. Okay, so there's 24, and they all are autonomous in their own way. But what works in one county or one district may or may not work in another, just the same way that in school, a student, you may have a set of students who are really good at learning one way, and then there's a couple of students who are not. And it's identifying how things are going to work with different people. And I find that just absolutely fascinating over the years, that it all comes back to recognizing the different people that we have and what's going to work for us.
Yep. That's leadership, right?
So talk to me about IEI, and how many folks are employed with IEI? Well,
it's summer, so we got a couple of interns, so we've grown to about 8 right now, but we're going to be 6 or 7 as we head into next school year for sure. We're it's we're always trying to find good people. We're not growing super quickly, and this is not a venture capital backed thing, but we have tripled in the last couple of years. So
right. So what are the challenges you're having about bringing people on board?
Well, I think the workforce right now is pretty mobile, right? And I think that the people, like when I was 25, I feel like the people who were my managers then considered us to be mobile. So I think it's a trend, right? Like it's people, they browse jobs. And so people are much more willing to go someplace for 2 months and say, this is not for me, and move on. And, I think us figuring out how to suss out the right fit is always the challenge, and find people. There are a lot of people on the market, but if you post on LinkedIn, hey, we're hiring a director of marketing, you get 4 million resumes. And so is that the best approach? I'm not sure. We're trying to work all that out, but it's very important for us that the fit is right, and that because we host these events, they need to be able to kind of interact with and talk to the superintendents. That's really important. So it has to be a good fit on that level. And so you just have to work through the process, but we have a really amazing team. And we started to hire people who do things that are really disconnected from the superintendents, like our operations person, right? She sits and writes code and looks at data. And the fact that we have that now, I think, is a sign of our, kind of growth. And that's really, I think, what the future looks like probably for us a little bit more versus, me going around and slapping backs and shaking hands and, saying hi to people. We built the beginning of it through relationships, but now the next few years have to be about efficiency and scale.
Right. In the superintendent's world, there's multiple schools. Each school has its own culture. How do you recommend, and what do you do about being able to lead multiple forces for that superintendent? Are there things that you're teaching them about changing the culture in one school? Even through a feeder schools, it's possible to have all those cultures just different. What do you do to try and bring up the consistency factor there? Is there anything in particular that IEI does to help?
I mean, look, we just convene the conversation. The content is usually each other. So like you're doing in this chat, I'm just asking big questions and getting them to talk to each other. What are you doing to work on this? So there's always sort of a theme. But one of the problem statements we're going to work on at the Newport event is related to progress monitoring. So I don't think we have good, there are good norm referenced assessments we can use to monitor student academic progress, especially in literacy and early math. We have a ton of these things we can give to kids so we can see how they are compared with national norms and help their family understand exactly, where they need to get some extra help, et cetera, right? We're not so good at tracking our progress as a system and making sure that all of our different, feeder zones you referenced are doing well or are growing at a similar rate. Then the other thing we talk about a lot is you have to factor in that, in certain districts particularly where they're large systems that were once subject to redlining, those socioeconomic injustices don't just disappear overnight. Like they're with you for years and years. And you have to be able to, when you're looking at monitoring progress, you have to take into account that in some parts of a county or a city, there may be places that are fighting a greater uphill challenge than other parts of that city or county, and making sure we understand that context. So I think those are two things we're always thinking about. And, we're trying to share strategies, and we're actually going to work on a district progress monitoring solution idea when we get together in a few weeks. And I encourage you and everyone else to check out the video we publish of that pitch and see what you think of what we did.
Awesome. That's going to be exciting to see how things are changing. And it's definitely a fluid environment right now. Between dealing with guns and everything of that nature, the violence that are going on in the schools, the socioeconomic challenges, the pandemic challenges. There's so many things. It's literally solving a Rubik's Cube at this point. That's what I'm noticing.
Yeah. That's the complexity of this job, because it's kids, it's their parents and families, it's people's lives. And we've now asked the school district to take on all these additional things that when we were kids, if we needed healthcare, that was in a separate place. If we needed social emotional support or mental health care, some people might have been like, what's that? Or you'd go somewhere else, right? Today districts, and increasingly too, the federal free and reduced lunch program has expanded. So districts are now feeding way more kids than they used to, kids in need. So school districts have had to become this kind of full service social agency. And that's not
what they were originally intended for, but they've had to become
right. That's not what Ben. So they don't have enough talent in these new areas, these social, emotional, mental health areas. They're all trying to bring in more experts to come and work in the school district. And, there's a big, if you want to be a school psychologist, this is a great time to enter that profession, because every district needs one, it seems. And it's very complex to transform the services an agency provides, especially, and I think the pandemic made it clear that we need more of these services. So, everyone's just trying to answer the bell.
We're doing this interview and it's in the middle of the summer, so we're going to be anxious to see what happens through the fall of the year and as we move through this upcoming school year on so many different levels. Doug, it's been a privilege to have you on board here with us at the Teamwork Advantage. If people need to reach out to you and learn a little bit more about IEI, what's the best way?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, they can go on our Twitter feed at IEI_K12. You can find me, Doug Roberts, on LinkedIn. We also have a page out there, and we're Institute for FOR.ED.Innovation.com. And come holler at us.
Cool. Well, again, I really appreciate the time. And, folks, once a week with the Teamwork Advantage, you get ideas and skills that you can start to implement on immediately. And today we focused in on education somewhat, yet take some of the ideas that Doug shared with us and look at your own business. Are you being innovative in doing things, whether you're in the education world or not? Until next week, my philosophy, having a good day is just being average. When you listen to the Teamwork Advantage, we know you're not average. So go make today an excellent and exceptional day. Until next week, take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Teamwork Advantage with Greg Gregory. Be sure to like, subscribe, and activate the bell icon to be notified of future episodes. To learn more about how Greg can help your organization develop a powerful winning culture, visit TeamsRock.com. That's TeamsRock.com.